Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Tent of Abraham. I'm Tamir Kreisman from Jerusalem, Israel, and we continue with Pirkei Torah Eliezer. I hope everybody had a good Shabbat and a wonderful Purim. We are still on the book of Esther. So, we're in chapter 50. This is 50b, the book of Esther, and this one is called He Who Sees the Future. Hallelu et Adonai kol goim shabechu kol haumim ki gavar alenu chasdo ve'emet Adonai leolam hallelujah. Rabbi Shimon says, "Come and see the wisdom of Mordechai, who knew the 70 languages, and his name was Mordechai Bilshan." Huh? What is the one characteristic that our sages say belongs to the wise? Because this is how it starts with him, right? From Masechet Tamir 32a. Ezehu chacham, who is wise? Haro'eh et hanolad, he who sees what is to come. Meaning, he who sees the future. So once upon a time, when men were connected to the land, there could be a slight drop in temperature, and they could predict rain, let's say, 3 days out. What about, for instance, let's go today's day, a stock analyst, right? A good one, that is. They could look at a stock. They see the patterns. They see where it was, likely where it's going, together with the market, all the different variables over there. And at the same time, they're going to have all the information regarding the ins and the outs of that specific stock, of that company. And they know beyond a shadow of a doubt which way it is headed. So we all saw Wall Street, right? Intelligence is the number one commodity. And this is true for the world stage as well. Francis Bacon famously said, "Knowledge is power." People like to quote that, and this is true. And he said this in 1597. But where do you think he got that from? Hosea 4:6. "My people were silenced for lack of knowledge. Demu ami mibli da'at." Demu, like we said, it is like almost snuffed out. It's completely silenced, mibli da'at, without knowledge, without knowing God. Because you have rejected knowledge. I will also reject you from being a ruler to me. Seeing that you have forgotten the Torah of your God, I too will forget your children. We don't want it to get to that situation. Now, there's no doubt that Mordechai had Ruach HaKodesh. We already discussed this. But even if he didn't, and he did, but for argument's sake, even if he didn't, there is a reason Pirkei Torah Eliezer says, "Come and see the wisdom of Mordechai, who knew the 70 languages." It could have been like, Mordechai has Ruach HaKodesh and that's it, no problem. No. This doesn't just mean to get by in the language, let's say to speak to, somebody else if you go in another country and you speak French or whatever. Though, why would you go there, right? Or have a great ear for accents and proper speech. We're talking about nuances, we're talking about cultural understandings, we're talking about the national thought process. This is what it means to command a language truly, especially in the 70 languages, meaning the entire world. A nation's tongue is how they represent themselves to the world. A nation's language is so much more than a means of communication. And what tongue is greater than the holy tongue, right? By which God spoke reality into existence. By which he spoke to the patriarchs, making an eternal covenant with them, and gave the Torah, the very blueprints of creation itself, to their seed, to the children of Israel, by which we as Jews, to the best of our ability, can carry out said commands, all in the holy tongue, Sfat Kodesh, Lashon HaKodesh. Now I know there's an entire religion out there, y'all know it too, who believe that the angels speak in whatever ridiculous sounds that individual happens to spew out of their uneducated mouths at that moment. But I can tell you, the language of the angels is Hebrew. So when our text tells us that Mordechai spoke all 70 languages, and it ties to wisdom, right? It is telling us that this man was like a supercomputer, filled with mundane knowledge of the world. Nothing is mundane in a sense, right? But filled with that knowledge of the world for the sake of navigation in the exile, as well as everything that was Torah. Today, if you ask, let's say, a certain AI program, who can calculate all the recorded knowledge in milliseconds, right? That's what they do. Boom, question, answer. And you ask them to, quote unquote, predict a scenario that actually does unfold. Prophecy has nothing to do with it, but rather it's about taking everything into account, or even in simpler terms, pattern recognition. It went here, it went there, it's going here, it's going there, that's going to influence, this is going to up, that's going to down, here we go. This is what's happening right now. And again, milliseconds, this is what these computers do. Mordechai would put these AI systems to complete shame. Just because you can recite Torah, and I'm sure you could put the entire Torah in Hebrew to these AI systems, but it doesn't mean you can have any understanding of its depths. Because as we discussed, you can acquire wisdom by learning. In other words, you can have information. You can gain knowledge through this information by knowing these things. This says this says that, right? But understanding binah, that is something that is a gift from God. Not everybody has it. Again, in these other religions, people like to quote the Bible. They know the Bible better than most Jews. Inside out, this verse, that verse, although it's in English, so the thing doesn't even mean anything. Nevertheless, okay, so you acquired wisdom, you have knowledge, but zero understanding of what the actual text says. If we are worthy, and that is something that a machine or an idolater can never achieve, then we get this understanding, and then everything kind of comes together. Hence, Ezehu Chacham haroeh et hanolad. Who is wise? He who sees what is to come. He who can see the future. The Hebrew is haroeh, to see it, the, right? Et, rather et. There's no translation for it. Hanolad. Nolad comes from the word born, that which will be born, that which will be, the future. And his name was Mordechai Bilshan. Okay, so what is this and where is this from that his name is Mordechai Bilshan? The book of Ezra, chapter 2, verses 1 to 2. It's in verse 2, but we're going to read one for context. And these are the people of the province who went up from captivity of the exile, whom Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, had exiled to Babylon, and they returned to Jerusalem and Judea, each one to his city. So like we said, Mordechai and Daniel and many other tzaddikim we're going to see, they actually did do the return from Babylon to Israel to rebuild the second temple. But like we discussed, Mordechai and Daniel and these dudes are like, they saw in Ruach HaKodesh. Again, you could go with wisdom, but they saw in Ruach HaKodesh, we got to get back because soon there's not going to be a Jewish people. Why was it halted? Why was the building of the temple halted? We saw it was due to Vashti. She got what was coming to her. Those who came with Zerubbabel were from the tribe of Judah, right? Okay, those who came with Zerubbabel, it was Yeshua, that is Yehoshua the high priest, Nehemiah, Seraiah, Realiah, Mordechai, Bilshan, Mispar, Bigve, Rechum, Bana, the number of the important men of the people of Israel. So again, the text says in Hebrew, Mordechai Bilshan. Bilshan as in Bilshon. Lashon is tongue, Bilshon in the tongue. In other words, Mordechai, we'll call him the tongue master, right? Because he commanded the 70 languages. He was known for this, meaning he understood every facet of the world. He could go on, he is the worst, better than any Delta Force team. He could go into any country and he could topple the government because he understood, he had an understanding of the essence of every single one of the nations, meaning the entire world. This guy was a living, breathing, super computer that could never be invented. The last person we've learned about with the command of the 70 languages, the 70 tongues, was Joseph, who was taught the 70 tongues in one night by the angel Gabriel. Before he went to see Pharaoh, that night is when he taught him all 70 tongues so he could actually speak to Pharaoh. Every tongue got him, every language got him another step. He had 70 steps up until the throne of Pharaoh. But in the end, when he got to him, the only language he did not speak was Hebrew. Joseph knew Hebrew, but Pharaoh did not know Hebrew. And that was like, Joseph's like, אתה מבין מה שאני אומר עכשיו? לא? אין בעיה. אני אשמור את זה בינינו. And that's what happened. No, I'm not going to translate. Anyway, so we've also learned that Joseph was given so much wisdom, specifically wisdom, that he ascended to the level of Chokhmah de Atzilut, the supernal wisdom from the world of emanation. What did it say about Joseph regarding Ruach HaKodesh from Genesis 41:38? So Pharaoh said to his servants, will we find anyone like this man in whom there is the spirit of Elohim? Asher Ruach Elohim bo, this guy is filled with the Ruach, with the spirit of Elohim. Whoa. Regarding wisdom and understanding, from Genesis 41:39, then Pharaoh said to Joseph, since God has let you know all this, there is no one as understanding and wise as you. Vayomer Paro Yosef achrei hodia Elohim otcha. Hodia comes from the word da'at. There is knowledge. Kol zot ein navon from bina, understanding, vechacham, and wise, wisdom like you. So Joseph had chokhmah bina v'da'at on these ridiculously high levels. These are the qualities that Joseph had, as God placed him second to the king in order to preserve life, right? Genesis 41:43, and he had him ride in his chariot of second rank. Listen what it says in Hebrew, Va'erkevoto b'mirkevet ha-mishneh. That's the word we're focusing on. And about Mordechai, who we learned possessed the same wisdom and understanding, Esther 10:3. For Mordechai the Jew was viceroy to King Achashverosh, forget the English, Mordechai HaYehudi mishneh. Lamelech HaChashverosh. Mishneh comes from the word sheni. Sheni is second. Rishon, first. Sheni, Shlishi, Revi, Chamishi, and so on. They were both mishneh to the king. Now, I know this was a long build-up, okay? But let's give credit where credit's due. Mordechai was on that level. And Mordechai would sit at the gate of the king to see that Esther and her maidens will not defile themselves with any unclean foods. What was our understanding from last week's class, where it said that Mordechai did not put any unclean foods into his mouth? Our text made sure to point that out, right? It's more than just food. It's the entire lifestyle of how a person carries themselves. For, in layman's terms, how important is it for us to keep kosher? Okay, that's obviously. So, Leviticus 11, this is in layman's terms what it means not to put any clean foods in our mouth. For I am the Lord your God, right? Ki ani Hashem Elohechem. You have the Yud Kei Vav Kei, the name of mercy, and Elohechem from Elohim, the name of judgment. And you shall sanctify yourselves and be holy, because I am holy. And you shall not defile yourselves through any creeping creatures that crawl on the ground. Now, this is repetitive all throughout, chapters 10 and 11 in Leviticus. What to eat, what not to eat. By not eating this and by eating this along with the Torah, you keep yourselves holy. You become holy. Why? Because God is holy. For I am the Lord who has brought you up from the land of Egypt to be your God. In other words, if you want to stay in Egypt, keep eating whatever you want. No problem. Dude, get up, kill, and eat. Sure. But in order to be your God, I need to take you out of that. You need to be removed from the Egypt, from the ways of the world. You need to be a Pharisee, a parush, lifrosh. That's what the word Pharisee means in Hebrew. Its origin. Lifrosh means to be pulled away, to separate yourself from the world. That is why God said, I'm separating you from the world. You're mine. The rest of the world's the rest of the world. You are mine. Brought you from the land of Egypt to be your God. Thus you shall be holy, because I am holy. Okay, it can't get any clearer than that. There's a reason God calls certain animals holy and everything else is unholy, because you are what you eat. And it's not only about eating kosher animals, it's about how it's all prepared, from birth to raising them, to feeding them, to slaughtering them in the most humane way possible. That's why a lot of times today, and I could say this already, my wife and I, we don't eat non-grass-fed meat because of all the stuff not only that they put into them, but they're also raised in very inhumane ways. So what if you give a kosher, humane shechting? The animal is struggling its entire life. By default, the meat is already not good. So, and there are places in Israel, free roaming buffalo, baby. It's delicious. Eating for grazing in the hills of the Galil and the Golan. So like we said, it's about how everything's prepared from birth, raising them, feeding them, to slaughtering them in the most humane way possible, as given to us by God. You are not allowed to mistreat animals. Make no mistake of this. If you eat foods that are unclean, you by default become unholy, even if you did it by accident, okay? And then it doesn't matter what commands you keep, because your vessel is unholy. When you do a mitzvah, you're not only lifting this world up, you're drawing down light to your vessel. But if your vessel is unclean, that's why, again, sorry, Messianics, not sorry. You have Gentiles living as Jews. It doesn't matter what you do, because your vessel is not clean, you are corrupting that which is holy. Big no-no. But I've already explained this plenty of times. That's on you. Good luck with that. Because your vessel is unholy and unworthy of inhabiting holy things, let alone any semblance of wisdom, understanding, and Ruach HaKodesh, right? We know that Esther was a prophetess, as Mordechai raised her in the ways of holiness. And so he made sure that he stayed that way. This was not only for her survival, but for the survival of Israel. The guy saw the future. He knew exactly what was going to happen. And so why was he concerned about her maidens? Because a holy person may not associate with anyone who is unholy, especially not one who waits on you night and day, which they were. It says in the Talmud, you're not even allowed to look in the face, in the eyes of a person who is rasha, a wicked person. Who is a wicked person? Clearly it says, a person that doesn't keep the mitzvot. You can't look in their face. Now, obviously we do that today because I keep as many mitzvot as I possibly can. If I know there's something I should be doing or not doing, of course I'm going to do it. I don't consider myself to be a holy dude. I don't consider myself to be a righteous dude. I consider myself to be a reformed evil guy who's working, like every single day. It's a struggle every single day. I don't think I'll ever get to the point where, hey, I'm righteous, I'm a tzaddik, it's all good now. That's not the point. You guys missed the point. The Torah makes sure that every single day, in order to do this, that's how we live our lives. Anyway, you understand the point. Okay, so her handmaids, 7 of them, obviously significant number, they acted as a holy wall around her because they were holy Jewish women themselves, like the 7 clouds of glory around Israel. And Mordechai heard 2 of the king's servants speaking in the language of the Chaldeans. That's Ul Kasdim. Chaldeans is Kasdim. Ul Kasdim, as mentioned throughout the Tanakh, and the first place it's mentioned in Genesis 11:28. And Haran died during the lifetime of Terach his father, and in the land of his birth, in Ur of the Chaldeans, Be'ul Kasdim. So he heard them speaking in the language of Kasdim. How did Haran, the brother of Abraham back then, Abram die? He threw himself into the furnace that Nimrod had prepared for Abram. The problem was he followed Abram and not God. So he was incinerated. That's a long and the short of it, basically. But you could read it in the book of Jasher. It speaks there in detail. The place is called Kasdim. And the Ul part is furnace, right? Ul comes from ol, light, fiery furnace, which means furnace refers to that specific incident. So it was what happened in the Chaldeans. Abraham was thrown into the Ul, into the furnace. So we know it was in an area within the borders of ancient Babylon from the days of Nimrod. So that's where these dudes were from. So Mordechai heard them saying, now the king is going to take his afternoon nap. Now the question is, why the adding of the word now? It said ata, ayin tafeh. Now the king is going to take his afternoon nap. Manishtana, what has changed? It was said that when Esther entered into the palace at around the month of Tevet, until she got settled and acclimated, the months became warmer. So Tevet Shvat is already, the trees are starting to blossom. Now we're in Adar, it's already starting to get warmer. Nisan is already is already springtime, that's already Passover. So just a few, 2.5 months before springtime, this temperature started to change. So the months became warmer and the days became longer, and it was customary to take a nap in the heat of the day around noon or so. When it was hottest, okay, no point of being outside. They didn't have any AC. we're going to go lay down and have one of my slaves or 10 of them feather me with feathers. It's good to be a king. They continued and said, when he wakes up from his nap, he will be thirsty. How did they know? Because the weather was indeed getting hotter and more dry, and naturally he would wake up parched. You ever wake up from like a nap in the heat of the day with no AC and your mouth like, and you need that? They got it. Followed by, and oh, look, apparently they knew the future too, right? Pattern recognition. Followed by, then he will tell us to bring him water, and we will give him poison. It specifically says Sam Hamavet, literally translated as the drug of death, in his pitcher made of gold. In other words, in a gold pitcher. And they would have gotten away with it too if it wasn't for that meddling Jew. So, and Mordechai heard their words, meaning he understood their speech, their tongue, even if they were speaking in code. He got it. And went and told Esther. And Esther told the king in the name of Mordechai, as said in Esther 2:22. And the matter became known to Mordechai, and he told it to Queen Esther, and Esther told it to the king in Mordechai's name. Now look what it says over here. In Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer, from here, meaning from this source in 2:22, the sages said that anyone who says anything in the name of he who said it brings redemption to the world. Kol haomer davar b'shem omro, mevi geula la'olam. Wow, so this is huge. And this is why, when we read Talmud or Mishnah, we see that everything is said in the name of he who said it. And it could go back to 3 or 4 or 5 sages that pass it along. Rabbi Yossi said in the name of Rabbi Shimon, who said in the name of Rabbi this, who said in the name of who said, what did he say? And then it starts to teach. Why is this so important? Because it brings Geula La'olam. Okay, so, but let's give a practical explanation. What does that mean? Moses received the Torah at Sinai. We know this. And transmitted it to Joshua. Joshua to the elders, and the elders to the prophets, and the prophets to the men of the great assembly. They said 3 things. This is from what? This is from Pirkei Avot 1:1, Ethics of the Fathers, Mishnah Avot 1:1. This is how everything started, and that is why they started with it, because everything that came after that, that's your point of origin. So, the men of the great assembly, they said 3 things. Be patient in administration of justice, raise many disciples, and make a fence around the Torah. And then as we read the chapters, and Rabbi so-and-so said in the name of this guy, is Shimon HaTzadik, who was the last of the men in the great assembly, said so-and-so, and he said this. And then he taught the next guy who said in his name and so on and so forth. And that's how the whole Mishnah goes. And we're learning very specific, very important midot, how to conduct ourselves and how to think. It's a book of Jewish thought. So, do we read any of these things in the Torah? Not outright. Be patient in administration of justice. Raise many disciples and make a fence around the Torah. Do we actually, does it say these things in the Torah? No. This is where, the guys are playing for the other team. They're going to be like, see, the Jews are adding. It says don't add it. Okay, no problem. So, again, it doesn't say that outright, but it doesn't have to. But we can see that these have been implemented into the daily Jewish life from the days of Sinai already. So where did that come from? This is the oral Torah that has been passed from God to Moses, to Joshua, to the elders, to the prophets, to the men of the great assembly, to the sages, that we are actually learning, reading, and practicing from today. We don't have to worry about the nations, really. Not anymore. It's over. It's kind of funny. Anyway, because they deny all of this. And for them, redemption is not coming. It's not. Why? Because they deny the word of God. They don't have to follow the word of God, but they're denying it. That's the crazy part. We do not separate between the written Torah and the oral Torah, for you cannot have one without the other. How many times have we been through this? If you forgot, then please go to my way back when Parshat Shavua teachings, Parashat Mishpatim. Please circumcise your own heart. Do it. Do it. What are you waiting for? But by reaffirming this, where everything came from is like the chain of command, the point of origin. So we can see this point of origin, which is God giving it to Moses. This strengthens our faith. It doesn't need to strengthen anybody else's faith. It's not for them. That's why they don't understand. And when our faith gets stronger, especially when we can see the point of origin, it brings us closer to tshuva and the oneness with God. Unlike other religions, either piggybacking off of ours, like Christianity, with more proof of a sham than anything real or substantial, to Islam, get this, Islam, who's the guy of it? Muhammad, right? How many times is his name mentioned in the Quran? I couldn't believe this. 4. Okay. How many times is Moses' name mentioned in the Quran? 137 times. Jerusalem, Al-Quds, is mentioned 0 times because it is not a holy place to Muslims. But tell them that. And guess what? The way the Muslims actually list their sages, it's exactly the way we're commanded to do it. So they'll have all these scrolls. You know, Muhammad said to this guy who said it to that guy who said it to that guy who said it to that guy who said. We go back, they go forward. But in any case, it's the same concept. You have that chain of command because it's important for them. But of course, theirs only started about 1,500, 1,400 years ago. Ours goes back almost 3,500 years ago. Go figure. All right. So, this was said by so-and-so in the name of so-and-so. So we've been through that. So there's only just one point of origin, and everything else is just distortion. So again, we can trace everything back to Sinai. This is ours. Even the installation of the Sanhedrin, which became the men of the Great Assembly, that was already in Parashat Yitro. When Yitro, Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, the ex-high priest of Midian, told Moses, dude, you got to get a bunch of dudes together over here and you need to put a chain. And he said, word, okay, and that happened. And it happens till this very day. So in other words, that establishment was already written. That's how we get what we get today. Because one man can't teach Torah to the entire nation. You got to break it up. One man can't answer all the questions. You got to break it up. But it's like, Supreme Court. Only if they were honorable men. So, again, we trace everything back to Sinai. This is ours, and we have to take a look at it. To disregard this, to dismiss or disavow this link that is our literal lifeline is heresy. You can't cut that link. You're not connected to it then. And so, from Esther 2:22, where she said something in the name of Mordechai, from here, the sages said that anyone who says anything in the name of he who said it brings redemption to the world. And you best believe that that's what we want to do. And when the king arose from his afternoon slumber, he told his servants, the ones who always gave him a drink when he woke, he told them, hashkuni, water me. Lehashkot is to water. Hashkuni, water me. And they poured the water from the golden pitcher with the poison in it. So in other words, the poison was in the golden pitcher. The king then said to them, spill out the water from the pitcher before me to the ground. And they said, our Lord King, this water is beautiful water. It is good water. This is cold water. This is clear water. He wasn't buying it, obviously, because the thing was made known to him beforehand. He told them, this is the thought that came to, they're like, why are you doing it? He goes, because this is what I decided, that you should pour out the water, pour it to the ground, because that's what I feel like doing. Right away, he found the poison within the water, and he commanded that they be hanged, as said in Esther 2:23, and the matter was investigated and found to be so, and they were both hanged on the gallows, and it was written in the diary that was read before the king. Okay, so that was in 2:23, the very next verse. Now, our commentator, Velo od ela, look at me saying something in the name of he who said it. He has the following questions about what we just read. Here are the questions, brilliant questions. Why did the king not have them just drink the poison themselves? That's the first thing that I was thinking, like, you drink it, Second, why does the text say that they placed the poison in a gold vessel specifically? Because it says in the gold vessel, in the gold vessel. Okay. Why did they argue with the king that the water is good? Would that not have raised suspicions? They're like, you don't want it? All right, no problem. We'll get him another time, right? No. Why did they say that? Why did it say that it immediately or right away they poured out the water? The king said, pour out the water. He said, but it's good. He says, this is what I feel like. And immediately they poured it out. And finally, why did it say that he found the poison instead of seeing the poison? What is to find? Okay. So there were, according to Velodela, there were types of poison in the ancient world that came specifically from Edom, that whoever touches it dies instantly, but those who handle it are protected due to incantations. In other words, you're dealing with some substance, you do incantations, you are now protected from it, so you can handle it, but the next person that touches it, they die instantly. So, in other words, it has nothing to do with you. Furthermore, royalty do not drink or eat from vessels which cannot cancel out the poison. That's how they did in the ancient world. They're still a lot smarter than we are today. So when the poison, any kind of poison was put into them, the vessels would shatter immediately. And this is why the text tells us that they served him from a gold vessel, which would not shatter from the poison. That's why these things, again, what did they use the gold vessels for? They used it to drink wine. Here we're talking about water, right? Okay. So that already, everything so far put a red flag on the gold vessel. But the king also knew that if they had that other potion, meaning the poison that they're immune to, but anybody else that touch it would not be, the one who touches it will die. He didn't want them to come anywhere near him with the vessel and its contents, nor would it help if they drank it themselves because they could have been protected, right? So, why the changing of the vessel? This is why they argued with him. He's like, where's my usual non-gold vessel, or whatever other vessel it was, right? This is why they argued with him. To say that they found superb water, which would only befit a superb gold. Water this good should only go in a vessel by which the king drinks his finest, choicest wine, right? Gold vessel. They presented it to him like they found this is like a hidden treasure. We found this water, the perfect water with the perfect clarity and the perfect temperature and the perfect state, to which he responded, right. Poured out. Why would he do this? Have you ever seen these fools online who come into new money, okay? Like our boy Achashverosh did, who feels the need to show it to everyone how wealthy they are. Like you could see, in the world today, people who are they got a little bit of cash. They're going to start wearing nice suits. And then you have your multimillionaires. They're still going to be wearing nice suits and everything. But the billionaires, they wear whatever the hell they want. Sweatpants and, funky t-shirts. Because, dude, what are you going to do? I want to be comfortable. And I get it. So that's kind of like the difference. So, but then you have the old money, right? We're talking about the people that actually understand the value of a dollar. And then you have the personalities that look how much money I got. Okay. So these dudes, they'll go to they'll get like a luxury car or something, and they'll destroy it just so they could essentially pay something that, they would destroy something that could pay someone's rent for a year. They'll buy a Lamborghini and trash it. And there it is. Because look how much money I make. I don't care. Okay. So just to show how meaningless it is to them, thereby look how rich I am. Apparently, this was not uncommon for this buffoon of a king, Achashverosh. Again, if he wasn't warned about this, he would have drank that super special water right away, of course. Which is also why they poured it out very quickly, so he wouldn't find the poison within the water, which would likely have ever so slightly changed the water's clarity, color, or consistency. They're like, okay, boom, not slowly. Look how beautiful. Are you sure? Tell me when to stop. Say when. No, everything was out right away. So the miracle was, right, to bolster the point of Mordechai, that despite them pouring it all onto the ground, the water stayed together in a pool, and it did not disperse. clearly showing the drug of death as our text calls it within the water, meaning he could identify. This is also why they were hanged and not submitted to another type of death. They wished to lift their heads above that of the kings. The king made it so. You want to lift your head above mine? No problem. Hang him. So our text continues. Interesting, right? Everything that happened with the king, they would write it before him and place it in the king's box. What does it say? The text in Hebrew, it says, deluskema. Deluskema. Okay? Our sages say that this is a box of notes that the king will carry with him at all time. It doesn't actually mean anything. It's not like a Hebrew word. Okay? So, for instance, this event where Mordechai informed the king, saving his life, in the king's personal notes in the box that he would carry around with him, he would write Mordechai's name with, let's say, a smiley face next to it, and the date. But the detailed incident as to why Mordechai is on the king's good side, why did he get a smiley face, or if the king owes him a favor, that will be written in the king's chronicles, right? In the big book. He had a little black book, so to speak. As for these two dead guys and their families, their names were there with the sad face, okay, or thumbs down, net minus or something, I don't know. When the king wanted to remind himself of what went down, he would open up this box. What's in the box, right? It's the king's personal notes. That's what's in the box. In this case, they wrote the thing down which Mordechai had done upon the chronicles of the king. So, what is our takeaway? Practically speaking, of course, since we don't have Ruach HaKodesh, although a bunch of people claim that no, that's not relevant to them. For example, let's say that you are deathly allergic to peanuts or whatever. And your radar is going to be super aware all the time, right? Like you can't come near peanuts, so you can't eat peanuts. If you smell peanut butter, you start to get a rash, right? I don't know. So when it comes to food, kitchens, restaurants, or what have you, your observation, your awareness levels are going to spike because your life could potentially be in the balance, right? That's just one thing. Now, imagine if you are aware of everything all the time. I say imagine because very few people are even capable of doing this on that level, on a very superficial level, and yet we try, right? We know that when we walk in certain places in Jerusalem, especially if you're going through the old city and, you have to be very, very, very careful who's around you at all times. Always know, you go into a place, make sure you know where the exits are. Make sure that you could see the street. Make sure you could see everybody that comes and goes. It's very important. You kind of have to learn how to do it here. If you go on public transportation or whatever, you also have to be aware because things happen here. So you're aware of that at that moment. But right now, I'm not like, okay, who's coming in, So imagine of being aware of everything all the time. That was like the level of Mordechai. But we're talking about how do we live like this? So that means, how do we do this? How do we try? This means that you have to know yourself without kidding yourself, okay? In other words, like really, being as real as possible with who you are, understanding your strengths, and constantly working on improving upon your weaknesses. This is very important because at the end of the day, it's only going to be you standing before God. Nobody else is going to be there with you. Why, this, that. You'll have all the answers because you know. So don't kid yourself because when it comes to the final redemption, your soul is literally in the balance. So please, for yourself, thereby adapting to every situation that you might find yourself in. You go into a different situation. What do I need to be aware of over here? What do I need to be aware of over here? See? This is where pattern recognition comes into play. Now, everything I said here can apply also, especially particularly to learning Torah. There are rules which our sages give us to help us make a bit of seder, order, within the balagan, chaos, okay? The Torah is the order of the world. Akol beseder, leil haseder. Seder means order. And so if we apply ourselves to the thought process of the Torah, particularly of the sages, because they break it down in Pirkei Avot, read it, get that book if you don't have it. This will naturally open up our understanding, because that's the point of origin. And if we understand Torah, which is the blueprint of creation, working the problem, any problem, should be much easier than it would be without Torah. So in other words, what would Abraham do? What did he actually do? How did he handle this? How did David handle that? They were spitting and throwing rocks on David. How did David, the Lord's anointed, King of Israel, Mashiach Hashem, how did he handle that insult? You see, how would we? Very different than David, likely, but we actually have what to aspire to. Everything comes around in the end, remember. Mordechai was a grand master of Torah. It was his dedication to it and living the life that God commanded that merited him Ruach HaKodesh. You don't just get Ruach HaKodesh. You have to do all that stuff that you may as well be able with the wisdom and understanding that God gives you to see the future. And on top of that, God gives you Ruach HaKodesh just to have with you because he likes you, right? To the point where anyone from the outside looking in would swear that he could see the future. So kids, that's the class for today. I do hope that you enjoyed it, but we're not done with the book of Esther just yet. Stick around for the next one. There is more to come. So as always, my friends, thank you so much for joining me. I do appreciate every last one of you. If you have any questions, feel free to email me. I know I have some emails to get back to. It's been a tough time, okay? I'm sorry. I will get back though. So in any case, y'all have a wonderful rest of the day, wonderful rest of the week, and have a Shabbat Shalom. Bye-bye.